So, in the entire decade prior to October 2023, Toronto police deployed one very specific, high level hate speech charge exactly 4 times.
Right. Just 4 times in 10 years.
Yeah. 4 times in 10 years. But in the 8 months following October,
Mm.
they have had to deploy that exact same charge 11 times.
Which is just, I mean, it's a staggering jump.
It really is. And today, we are looking at a stack of recent sources detailing two vastly different police investigations into hate-motivated incidents targeting the Jewish community in Toronto.
Yeah, and what these cases reveal is really a justice system that is completely fracturing under two totally different speeds of reality.
Exactly. We have these highly coordinated physical attacks that get solved in days, and then we have protest signs that trigger these massive, months-long digital forensics operations.
Because it forces us to confront the actual mechanics of law enforcement. We often assume that a crime happens, police arrive, and arrest is made. Boom.
Right, like a straight line.
Exactly. But when the weapon shifts from a physical projectile to a deeply anti-Semitic message, the legal threshold to prove intent changes entirely.
The gears of justice just switch to a totally different track, which is exactly what we need to figure out today. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be diving into this.
We are looking at local news reports, police press conferences, community statements out of Toronto, really just to understand how law enforcement investigates and prosecutes organized acts of hate.
Yes.
Now, a really quick but crucial note for you listening. Our sources today cover highly politically charged events, right? Including the fallout from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict playing out at a local pro-Palestinian rally.
Important context for sure.
Definitely. And our focus today is strictly to impartially report the facts, the mechanics of these arrests, and the legal realities that are outlined in the source material. We aren't taking political sides here.
Right. The goal is just to give you a clear-eyed look at how the legal system actually processes these incredibly tense situations.
Exactly. So, looking objectively at the investigative process is really the only way to understand why certain headlines unfold the way they do.
Yeah, and if we start with the first set of incidents, the physical assaults, we can see a baseline for how police respond to a tangible, immediate threat.
These events took place in North York, which is a major district in Toronto with a large Jewish population. The sources detail two specific dates: April 30th near Bathurst Street and Lawrence Avenue West, and May 7th, right outside the Congregation Chassidei Bobov Synagogue.
Yeah, right near Highway 401.
Right. And in both of those instances, suspects driving a blue Lexus SUV rolled past individuals who were visibly identifiable as Jewish and fired what police refer to as gel blasters.
Right, which are essentially imitation firearms.
Yeah, like Orbeez guns. They shoot water-absorbing gel beads instead of bullets. So the victims sustained minor physical injuries. But because these are technically toy guns firing gel, there's been this narrative floating around that this is just child's play. Like, oh, it's reckless teenagers messing around, and treating it like a major hate crime is an overreaction.
Yeah, but the sources show that law enforcement just utterly rejects that narrative.
Fully.
What's fascinating here is how the law views psychological trauma versus, physical ballistics. Police Chief Superintendent Catherine Stevenson actually addressed this directly.
What did she say?
She pointed out that while the weapon was an imitation firearm, the victims on the street, well, they had absolutely no way of knowing that in the moment.
Obviously not.
Right. They experienced the profound shock and fear that comes with believing they are actively being shot at.
I mean, I have to push back on the whole child's play idea, too, just purely from a human behavior standpoint. Like,
Yeah.
if someone walks into a bank and robs it using a water pistol, they've spray-painted black. The teller's trauma is 100% real. Because in that split second, their life is flashing before their eyes. The brain doesn't have the luxury of pausing time to, analyze the muzzle velocity, you know?
Well, of course not. You just react.
Right. You feel an impact, you hear a crack from a passing vehicle, and your fight or flight system just detonates.
And we really have to place that fight or flight response into the broader context of what this specific community has been enduring lately. You can't separate the gel blaster from the environment it was fired in.
That's a great point.
Stevenson made a point to highlight the timeline of fear here. This is a community that has already witnessed actual live fire shootings.
Real bullets.
Real bullets.
Yeah.
There have been shots fired at 2 different synagogues in the area, at Jewish-owned businesses, at the U.S. consulate.
Wow.
So when an individual is walking out of their place of worship and is suddenly struck by a projectile from a moving SUV, their deeply conditioned immediate response is that this is a lethal attack.
The trauma inflicted in that moment doesn't just wash off when they realize it was a gel bead.
Exactly. The intent to terrorize was successful.
So law enforcement treats this with the same severity as discharging a real firearm because the psychological damage is virtually identical.
Absolutely.
But knowing the impact is really only half the story. The sources transition us from the psychology of the victims to the organization of the perpetrators. And this completely upends how we usually think about these crimes.
It really does. We often default to the lone wolf theory, right, when we hear about targeted harassment.
Yeah, we picture an isolated, radicalized guy in a basement acting out spontaneously.
Right. But the physical nature of a drive-by assault leaves this massive trail of tangible evidence. License plates, vehicle rentals, physical descriptions, and the digital footprints left by coordinating those things.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the scale of the arrests here is wild. The police didn't just arrest one angry guy.
No, not at all.
They arrested an 18-year-old named Ruslan Novrazov on May 8th. They executed search warrants, found the gel blasters, and then that single arrest kind of acted as the key to a much larger map.
Yeah, to broke it wide open. By May 22nd, they arrested 4 more people.
Wow.
A 20-year-old, a 23-year-old, and 2 teenagers, a 16-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl.
Jeez.
And add in 2 other youths who are still wanted, and you have 7 people involved in coordinating this.
So how does a group that ranges from, like, high schoolers to adults in their 20s organize something like this without tripping alarms earlier?
Well, it speaks to the localized peer-to-peer nature of the radicalization we're seeing. Chief Superintendent Stevenson was unequivocal. She stated these were not random acts.
Right.
Based on the evidence they gathered from that first arrest, likely text messages, shared locations, things like that, police alleged this group deliberately targeted members of the Jewish community.
So it wasn't a crime of opportunity.
Not at all. These attacks were organized and planned, with some of the logistical planning happening the day before the actual assaults. They shared the blue Lexus, they acquired the imitation firearms, and they coordinated their schedules to carry this out.
Okay, so we aren't talking about a spontaneous bad decision. We are talking about premeditated logistics.
Exactly.
And when I see the charges they are facing, assault with a weapon, possession of a weapon, I also notice mischief interfering with property for some of them. Can you explain that?
Sure.
Because when I hear mischief, I think of, teenagers throwing toilet paper over a tree or maybe breaking a mailbox.
Right. Yeah, the word sounds pretty minor.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Canadian Criminal Code, mischief interfering with property is far more serious than the name implies. It doesn't just mean you broke a window.
Okay.
The legal definition includes obstructing, interrupting, or interfering with the lawful use, enjoyment, or operation of property. So in this context, if you are firing projectiles at someone's vehicle or at a synagogue's entrance, you are fundamentally depriving that community of the safe, lawful use of their environment.
You're turning a place of worship or a public street into a zone of targeted hostility.
Precisely.
That makes total sense. It's about the deprivation of safety, not just property damage.
Yeah.
But looking at the scale of this, 7 people planning targeted attacks, my mind immediately goes to larger terrorist networks.
Which is a natural jump to make.
If you have an organized cell targeting a specific demographic, is this linked to an international group? Because there was just that high-profile case involving an Iraqi man arrested in the U.S. who was linked to the Toronto consulate shooting.
Right. The sources specifically address that exact fear. Reporters actually asked Stevenson that very question. Is this blue Lexus crew part of a broader international terror cell?
And what did she say?
Her answer was a definitive no. There is no evidence suggesting any link to foreign actors. There is no direct international threat manifesting in this specific case.
Which, honestly, is almost more unsettling to me.
How so?
Because if this were an international terror cell, we could kind of wrap our heads around the sophisticated brainwashing required to make someone do this. But this is a highly localized, homegrown network.
Yeah, that's true.
You have people from the neighborhood, including minors, organizing themselves to inflict trauma on their neighbors. One of our sources, a statement from the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, pointed out that the involvement of these teenagers should be a massive wake-up call about how normalized hate has become locally.
It really highlights a critical shift in how radicalization happens today. It doesn't always require an international handler anymore. It can happen in local chat groups and peer networks.
Just normal group chats turning into coordination for an assault.
Yeah. But from an investigative standpoint, the key takeaway here is speed. law enforcement shut down this physical network in weeks. The first arrest happened the day after the second attack. The rest followed shortly after. The evidence was physical, the mechanism of the crime was physical, and so the justice system moved at a very familiar pace.
But when the weapon shifts from a physical gel bead to a piece of cardboard with a drawing on it, the police lose that speed entirely.
They hit a massive legal wall.
Yeah. The sources detail a completely different type of investigation where the timeline of justice just grinds to a halt.
We are moving from physical intimidation to the incredibly high legal threshold of prosecuting hate speech, and the tools required to investigate this are fundamentally different.
So let's lay out what happened. This goes back to March 15th at a pro-Palestinian rally located at the intersection of Bathurst Street and Shepherd Avenue West.
Which, for context, is a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in Toronto.
Exactly. And according to police, during this protest, certain individuals displayed and distributed deeply anti-Semitic signs, and the sources clarify that these weren't just aggressive political slogans regarding the conflict.
No, these were signs depicting Jewish people as rats, or as gaunt monsters with long noses crawling out of the ground.
Just classic historical anti-Semitic tropes.
Yeah. And furthermore, police noted that some of the individuals holding or distributing this material were intentionally wearing disguises.
Like trying to hide from the cameras.
Exactly, to conceal their identities from law enforcement and the public.
So this rally happens in mid-March, but if you look at the arrest timeline, it's completely disconnected from the event.
Totally.
The first suspect, a 33-year-old named Mohammed Anas Seal, isn't arrested until April or May. And it isn't until May 31st, like 2.5 months after the protest, that police execute search warrants across Toronto and the Durham region.
Right.
They raid homes, seize clothing, seize digital devices, and then finally arrest 5 other individuals ranging from teenagers to men in their late 40s.
The contrast is jarring, honestly.
I mean, I am genuinely struggling to understand the mechanism here because prosecuting a physical assault makes sense. It's like a police officer citing you for speeding, right?
Right.
The radar gun catches you, the physical evidence is immediate, the ticket is written on the spot. But prosecuting hate speech seems to operate like an IRS audit.
That is a great way to put it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Why does an officer on the street on March 15th have to watch someone hold a sign depicting an entire demographic as rats, and instead of arresting them, they go back to the station, wait 2 months, dig through digital devices, and raid their house?
Well, that IRS audit analogy is incredibly accurate because it all comes down to the burden of proving internal intent rather than just observing an external action.
Ah, okay.
The delay is entirely due to the legal threshold required by the Canadian justice system to prosecute speech. The charges these men face are willful promotion of hatred and public incitement of hatred.
Right.
And to lay those specific charges, the police cannot act autonomously. They actually require the explicit formal consent of Ontario's Attorney General.
Wait, really? The Attorney General? The absolute highest legal officer in the entire province has to personally sign off on a guy holding a piece of cardboard at a street corner.
Exactly.
That fundamentally changes the speed of the system. You are shifting the burden from a beat cop to the top of the legal pyramid.
And the Attorney General does not sign off based on a photograph of sign. The police, specifically the Counterterrorism Security Unit, they have to meticulously build a case that survives the strict legal test for willful promotion.
So what does that test look like?
They have to prove subjective intent. They have to prove that the individual didn't just hold an offensive sign someone handed them, but that they consciously, willfully intended to promote hatred against an identifiable group.
Oh, I see.
That's what crosses the line from deeply offensive protected political speech into criminal hate speech.
So that explains the digital devices. They aren't raiding homes in May for a protest in March just to find the cardboard.
No, not at all.
They need the phones. They need the text messages to prove the person knew what they were doing, maybe even coordinated the printing of the signs, or discussed their intent to harass the neighborhood.
Precisely. They are building an audit of the person's intent. And they also need to secure the physical clothing to match disguised individuals to the event.
Because they were covering their faces.
Right. In Canada, there is a specific charge for wearing a disguise with intent to commit an indictable offense. If you cover your face specifically to evade prosecution while willfully promoting hatred, that is a separate, serious layer to the investigation.
Wow, so compiling all of this digital forensics, matching the clothing to video footage, drafting the legal briefs and convincing the attorney general that the legal threshold has been met. That takes months.
It does. Toronto Police Chief Myron Demenke actually addressed the public's frustration over this lag. He stated, "This is an example of what we mean when we say that arrests and charges can come at any time after an incident."
So he's essentially pleading with the public to understand that a lack of immediate handcuffs on the 6 o'clock news doesn't mean the police are ignoring the event.
No.
They are just grinding through a much more rigorous legal gear.
Yeah, and this brings us back to that staggering statistic from the very beginning of our deep dive.
Right.
To understand the immense strain this puts on the counterterrorism security unit, you really have to look at the historical data Chief Demke provided.
Right.
Prior to October 2023, the charge of willful promotion of hatred was used 4 times in 10 years. Since October, it has been used 11 times.
Which isn't just a statistical anomaly, that is a total paradigm shift.
Huge shift.
If an IRS office is used to doing 4 major audits a decade, and suddenly they have to do 11 in 8 months, the entire bureaucratic infrastructure is going to redline.
Oh, absolutely.
The police are suddenly processing an unprecedented volume of cases that require the highest possible legal consent, massive digital forensics, and months of investigation just to make an arrest.
It reveals a massive spike in behavior that deliberately attempts to cross the line from protected expression into criminal hate speech. The system was designed to make prosecuting speech incredibly difficult.
To protect civil liberties.
Right, exactly. But when that system is flooded, the slow speed becomes highly visible and deeply frustrating for the communities being targeted.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating a world filled with these kinds of headlines? Let's distill the core insights from the sources we've unpacked today.
Okay, let's do it.
First, law enforcement is making zero distinction between the trauma of a real weapon and an imitation one. The psychological damage of a gel blaster fired in a climate of fear is treated with the exact same severity as a real firearm because the terror it inflicts is identical.
Yeah, and second, the myth of the isolated lone wolf is increasingly inaccurate. We are seeing localized, highly organized networks of young people coordinating logistics to target specific communities. Unraveling the digital and physical threads of these homegrown networks is a primary focus for police right now.
And third, understanding the mechanics of the law completely changes how we consume the news. When you see a physical crime, the timeline makes sense, the evidence is tangible, the arrests are swift.
Yeah.
But when the weapon is speech, the timeline slows to a crawl because the legal burden shifts to proving intent to the Attorney General.
And knowing that protects us from cynicism. When the headlines seem to lag weeks or months behind a protest, it doesn't necessarily mean the system is broken or apathetic.
Right.
It means the system is operating exactly as designed,
Yeah.
demanding an extraordinarily high burden of proof before criminalizing expression.
But, it leaves us with a final massive question to mull over.
What's that?
The system is operating as designed, yes, but it was designed for an era where this charge was used 4 times in a decade.
Yeah.
If the legal threshold for the willful promotion of hatred is now being crossed almost 3 times as often in just 8 months, how will our legal infrastructure adapt?
It's a great question.
If the gears of justice are already struggling to keep time with the sheer volume of organized hate, what happens when the system's battery starts running low? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll catch you on the next one.